to get it. It'll be posted on our website. And at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A. Excellent. So we'll talk about RFSI, Resilient Food System Infrastructure Grants. The purpose and priority of this grant program is to focus on small and medium-sized businesses as defined by the SBA. We'll get into that a little bit later on and more into the details of eligibility. And the goal of it is to provide additional choices and options for consumers and producers with an emphasis on value added and middle supply chain building. All entities need to demonstrate that their projects are going to support local entities. So local is going to have multiple tiers for us in Rhode Island. Local is going to mean Rhode Island as a state and then also regionally. And that's the emphasis for us, is those 2 tiers of local. There is a desire to support underserved communities, to support family run businesses that also work in the treatment and safety of their workers, and looking for projects that are submitted by cooperatives or farmer worker-owned enterprises. So a grant does not have to support all of these priorities. These are just, just one of the funding priorities is sufficient for any grant. Next slide. So who's eligible? All entities must fit within one of the 5 categories in order to be eligible for this grant. You need to be an agricultural producer or processor, or a group or collaborative of producers and processors. And this, we're going to think more farm-based processing. The second category is a nonprofit organization that works in the middle of the supply chain and supporting either through their activities or supporting middle supply chain producers and processors. Local governments are eligible. Local tribes are also eligible. And any institutions such as schools, universities, or hospitals that support middle supply chain and multiple producers. Eligible projects are meant to fit into one of these categories. I'm going to say that these categories are not inclusive of everything, but we do expect that most projects are going to fit into these categories. 1, expanding processing capacities, including adding product types and increasing production volumes, supporting new wholesaler resale product lines, the modernization of equipment and facilities through upgrades, repair, or retrofitting, to adapt the product lines for institutional procurement, the purchasing or installation of specialized equipment, such as any components necessary for sorting, packing, labeling, or deliveries, the modernizing of manufacturing, tracking, storage, and IT systems, enhancing worker safety through the adoption of new technologies and investment in equipment and facility improvements, the construction of a new facility, increasing packaging and labeling capacities that meet compliance requirements under applicable laws. So think of your processing laws around labeling, sealing, transportation, etc. Increasing storage space, including cold storage, development or installation of climate smart equipment that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, increases efficiency in water use, improves air and or water quality, and or meets the needs of USDA's climate action goals, which we can provide a link for in the chat in a bit. Next slide. So what are some ineligible projects? And this ineligibility list is not based in Rhode Island. This is from USDA as to, projects that are ineligible or activities that are ineligible. Acquiring any property, including land purchases, is ineligible. Products around meat and poultry processing This includes wild caught seafood, so finfish. This does not include aquaculture. Aquaculture is an eligible product, and so is eggs. So those two are exceptions. Claiming of any expenses that have been or will be reimbursed under any other federal, state, or local government funding. So there can be no supplanting. And then also projects that have already received federal funding through grants or subaward program may not receive funding for the same activity, but it can build upon a previously funded activity, including the regional food business center subawards that will be coming out in the next year or so. Next slide. So the overview of the Rhode Island program, we're going to be focusing on middle of supply chain needs for local, meaning Rhode Island, and regional, meaning Northeast or New England, produced food products, including specialty crops, grains, dairy, for human consumption, aquaculture, and other food products. The goal is to support the food system and products meant for human consumption, excluding, as mentioned, meat and poultry products. DEM will administer a competitive grant cycle for both infrastructure and special use equipment only grants, and the total funding for those two grant programs will exceed $1.5 million. For infrastructure grants, the project minimum is approximately $150,000, and the cap will be just about $1 million. We only have 1.5 million in total grants to give out, so that is our cap. There is a match required. The match is a 1-to-1 match if you do not meet the requirements for underserved, for an underserved business. And we'll give approximately 80% of the 1.5 million out in the infrastructure grants. For the equipment only grants, and these are solely meant for equipment purchases. There are no other line items in the budget. There's no personnel, there's no technical assistance or training. It is solely for equipment, special use equipment. And these will span $20,000 to $100,000. There is no match required. And we approximate that we'll give 20% of the total allocation out as equipment only grants. The project timeline for us, the RFP for this is going to be released on November 1st, 2023. Through the Rhode Island Grants Management System, eService, and technical assistance will be provided throughout the RFA period. We expect the RFA is going to run for about 10 weeks on this program. The RFSI review committee is going to review applicants over the winter with a goal of getting all applicants reviewed and recommendations for projects to USDA by March for approval. This is so that we can get work done as quickly as possible, especially for the larger infrastructure-based grants. We hope that in summer of 2024, work will be able to begin. We'll have purchase orders in place for that to happen. And all work on this project must be completed by May 24th, 2024. There will be no cost extensions given. USDA has been very clear that they have no intention of extending projects past that date.
Okay. So Ananda and I are going to walk you through the required template by USDA. These are both on our website. There's an equipment only template, and there is a, let's see if sorry. There's an equipment only and an infrastructure grant template. So you'll see both of these listed on the DEM RFSI website. And we're going to quickly walk you through them. So I'm going to walk you through the infrastructure grant one first. Can you all see that? Perfect. Okay, so it's going to look very familiar to the specialty crop block grant application or template if you've seen that or applied to that. It's going to ask you some specific applicant information about your entity, the UEI number, which we are going to talk a little bit about later, but a SAMS.gov UEI number is required for an application. Your physical address, your mailing address, if it's different, the primary point of contact, then this is going to be something that you might not have seen before, the Distressed Communities Index. So this is where you will use this link right here, which is embedded into the PDF, and it'll let us know what distress score your county has. And so it's going to be county-based. It's not state-by-state based. And in order to do that, we'll show you an example later on, but you'll click this link and it'll bring you to where you can input your zip code, and it'll show you the distress score that is used for your specific county. This is a requirement by USDA. Then you'll self-certify what type of applicant you are. There are several categories, so agricultural producers or processors or groups of agricultural producers and processors, for-profit entities that are operating middle of the supply chain activities. That's a really important classification there. So it's processing, aggregation, or distribution of the targeted agricultural products that are mentioned. Every entity that's applying has to meet the eligibility requirements of the SBA or Small Business Association standards. That is also embedded into this form. You can find it on our website, and it is also on the last slide for this webinar, which we'll be sharing out with you at the end. Nonprofit organizations operating the same exact style of activities, local government entities, tribal governments, and institutions such as schools, universities, hospitals. There's going to be a project title, which is limited to 15 words. This is really helpful for us to disseminate what your project is about and using it for press releases that we will do. It'll give you the project start date and end date. Note that this end date cannot go past the May 2027 date that Ananda mentioned previously. An executive summary of 250 words or less. This is where you tell us what type of project that you're going to be doing. It includes those that Ananda mentioned, and then there is another other category. We encourage you to really read through the eligible projects and make sure that what you're proposing is allowable, and we are definitely able to review that ahead of time. So if you have a question or you're thinking about a project that you're creating and you want to run it by us first, please send us an email and we'll be happy to talk it over with you and make sure that when this application period opens, you're set to go with the project that you have planned. A specific issue or need that the project will address, the objectives that the project hopes to achieve, the project beneficiaries. So it says to estimate the number of project beneficiaries. This is not the number of folks the project will benefit, right? So it's not like if I am working as a state employee, this has the potential to benefit all Rhode Islanders. It's going to be the groups of producers or your entity that it's benefiting from. And you can check that type of beneficiary here. So underserved farmers and ranchers, new and beginning farmers and ranchers, veteran producers, processors, or other middle of the supply chain businesses. This is a section where you can detail other support that the project may have from state programming or federal, external project support, and then it gets into the performance measures. So there are different outcomes, so capacity in the middle of the supply chain for local, regional food products, and you'll click that apply, or if they're not applicable. Outcome 3, increase economic viability of local, regional producers and processors. There'll be a budget narrative, and this is where we need to see how you're going to be spending your funds, but also really important, what your matching funds are and how you're going to allocate them. There's a self-certification for that graduated match that Ananda mentioned earlier. So that is if your entity qualifies as a socially disadvantaged entity, you can have a 25% match instead of a 50%, and we'll go over that in a few slides. Then there'll be a budget summary, your personnel costs, personnel justification, fringe benefits, travel justification, equipment, supplies, construction, which may be different and new for some of you for these type of grants with USDA, contractual or consultant, and then other. And your indirect is the last one. So I'm going to switch over to the equipment only, and it'll look very familiar, just simplified. So it's going to ask you the same information as an applicant, your contact, that distressed communities index is also in there, type of applicant you are, a project title, an executive summary. And we recognize that with the equipment only grant, you're only going to be paying for that specific equipment cost. So this executive summary is going to let us know how it fits in with RFSI. How is that equipment going to expand your processing, aggregation, distribution? It's going to ask you again to identify those categories, the type of agricultural food products that are processed with the equipment, the scope of work, estimate number of local and regional producers that will be impacted. So if you are a commercial kitchen and you're purchasing a peeler, how many producer groups are going to be utilizing that peeler if you're in a shared space? It's okay if this is one, if this is just for you. And then it's the same outcome 2 and 3, just a lot shorter list of indicators because the other ones do not apply. The budget narrative, you can only include costs that are related to the equipment item. So if you're purchasing a peeler, it'll be peeler. I have no clue how much they cost. You could say $5,000, but no personnel, indirect costs are allowed with this one. And then the justification for the equipment. Like I mentioned, all of this information in these 2 templates are on our website, and you can review them ahead of your project. So these are the matching requirements that we mentioned. So infrastructure grants they have a match requirement. Equipment grants do not have a match requirement. So there is no match required if you're only purchasing equipment. The equipment is going to be $20,000 and above, whereas the RFSI infrastructure grants are going to be the following 2 that I mentioned. So if you are not considered a socially disadvantaged entity, you have to provide a 1-to-1 match or a 50% match. So if your total project costs $200,000, you're going to request $100,000 in federal funds, and you're providing $100,000 in match funds. If you qualify for that reduced match requirement, you will have $133,333.33 is the total project cost. That's at that lowest match. So you can exceed that, but that's the lowest amount. The federal funds that you'll receive are $100,000, and the match that you will be given to the project will be $33,333, and so on. Within the RFSI grant program, we are allowed to keep 20% of the funds for state-led supply chain coordination, and we are going to keep that 20% of the funds and do the following. So we'll have a technical assistance program that we're going to be running through the Rhode Island Food Policy Council, and they're going to be providing applicants with application support and post-award activities as well. We'll be providing business market development and business coaching through the Land and Sea Together network. So if you're familiar with that platform, we're going to be utilizing their relationships that they've developed in the Rhode Island community and honing in on some of the resources that they've already developed and supporting that with RFSI funds. We're going to be collaborating with a regional mapping of supply distribution. The lead state on that is Vermont, and it's through the New England Food System Planners Partnership. We're also going to be hiring a supply chain coordinator through Commerce, And this is going to be a first of its kind in Rhode Island, where this person is going to build those connections between buyers and suppliers. So you're building out all of this infrastructure and you're going to be able to increase your operations. We want to make sure on the other end of the grant, you're going to have opportunities to connect with folks who are going to be able to take that increased product, and they're going to identify the barriers that you're having to get into that local food system in Rhode Island and be able to hopefully make changes and to let us know as a state agency what you all need support with. There are several things that you need to apply for this program, and so we want to let you know up front. You need a completed application in the Rhode Island GMS system. What that's going to look like is an extremely pared down, basically entity identifier information. We want your entity name, your UEI number, your business address, your point of contact information, that simple identifier information that's asked typically through grants. Then there's going to be that template that I just showed you. You're going to fill out that USDA required template and attach it to your application. That's all we're going to ask you for your application. So there aren't going to be any nuances to that in the application system. You're required to have a SAMS.gov UEI number, and you're also required to register with the Ocean State Procurement Portal. You can do this now if you'd like. That link is in this webinar. It essentially allows us to enter into a contract with you and pay you for the work that you're going to be doing. We put in some FAQs. We also will link the FAQs in the chat. But to check if your business qualifies, you have to use that SBA size tool. It's linked here. What is the definition of the middle of the supply chain? So for purposes of RFSI, the definition of middle of supply chain refers to those middle stages. So processing, aggregation, and distribution of product. Can infrastructure grant recipients' funds be used to make subawards? For example, mini grants below that 100K minimum award amount? No, you cannot apply for funds to then issue subawards later. Can you purchase land or buildings? No, you may not purchase land or buildings. Can unallowable costs be brought as an in-kind or cost share match? No, you can do in-kind match, but all of the costs that you're using as match have to be an allowable cost under the grant. Do infrastructure grant applicants, grantees need a UEI number? Yes. These are those helpful links. So you'll see that we have our own website where we're updating frequently. On that website, you can register for our newsletter, where first information goes out about our grants in the Division of Agriculture. Then there's an FAQ page that we have loaded on there. There's that Distressed Communities Index interactive map on there as well, and that SBA size guide tool. So now that we've gone through all of our slides, I wanted to direct you again to our website. We are setting up a catch-all RFSI email for DEM. So if you submit questions to that, it will go to Ananda and myself. It's not set up quite yet. It should be in the next few days. So that will go out in our newsletter as well and be updated on our website once we have that. So I see some questions are rolling into the chat. And I want to give everyone the opportunity. So let's see, who will serve on the grant review panel and what rubric will they use? So USDA will provide us with the template and scoring options for the RFSI grant. Currently, right now, the review committee and panel is up in the air. We have specific things that we're going to identify. We want to make sure that our reviewers are part of those key components of middle of the supply chain activities that are occurring in Rhode Island. So they have some specialized interest in that as well, and expertise. Can installation costs and labor be included in equipment grants? No, they cannot. Ananda, is that? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. They cannot. Yeah. So if you need to have any additional costs with the equipment grants, then that would be an infrastructure grant. So any technical assistance, installation, personnel, it can literally only be for the cost of the equipment. And part of the equipment only grant application is to submit a quote, or that you've done some kind of research to figure out what the cost of that is. So you will be required to submit that with the grant as well. Are loans eligible for match? Yes, loans are eligible for a match as long as the loan, like let's say I have a loan on a building and the building is where I'm going to be doing the processing or middle supply chain activity. As long as that loan would be an allowable cost, so you're using it for that project, yes, it would be considered in-kind match. Or I guess not having in-kind, it would be match.
Is a vehicle considered equipment? So a vehicle can be purchased, it just has to be specialized. So it can be like a refrigerated truck. It can be, that's kind of my example.
Yeah,
like,
it would have to be a very specific purpose
that plays into that middle of the supply chain activity. It cannot just be like an everyday use vehicle, say to bring more product to a farmer's market.
Yeah. Egg production processing would be allowed. I don't believe that washing would be considered processing, but packaging and value added would be. So if I was gonna make like, I don't know, egg cartons of like pre-homogenized eggs, I guess that would be fine. Or making quiche, sure, if you had a processing kitchen to serve for quiche. What type of SAM registration?
I haven't gotten that question before. It's the UEI number, I know for sure. And it's linked in that at like project template. So I would say what the guidance is there. I didn't know there were multiple.
I didn't know that either.
Is this grant specifically for farmers or producers in food in that way, or for all small businesses? So it would be all small businesses. So any entity that meets that SBA definition of a small business. And
sorry, go ahead, Jack.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, as long as they are procuring local product. So that would be the caveat to that. It can be any kind of food business that is supporting local specialty crops.
Would a mobile commissary kitchen be eligible? Would that be equipment or infrastructure grants? I think maybe a little bit of clarifying information. Is that like purchasing a food truck type? Maybe it's a trailer, not necessarily a truck. I think if you're purchasing that as just like a standalone piece, it would be equipment. But if you had to build one, I would say it would probably be an infrastructure grant. Does that sound right, Ananda?
Yeah, I think so. I think we just need more information. I think it would be helpful to send us something or more information, or send us something on offline, and we can try to answer exactly what you mean for that one. All right.
I noticed we have a hand raised. Do we want to go to
Sure, Doris.
quickly?
Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, I asked a question about the SAMs for the UEI number, because there are two types of registration. So we just want to make sure that they select the correct one, because one, it can be a very complicated process, and the other one will not, it will give you the UEI number. So if anybody has any questions, we can connect them with PTAC or Apex now to help them, through the registration process of SAM.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yep.
I do know that I'm not sure if the other one has a cost associated with it, but it is the free SAMS.gov registration that would be required. Okay. Sometimes USDA differentiates between processing and production, processing of ag products versus production, manufacturing of food. I have to imagine food production is part of middle of the supply chain. I would say that that is accurate, yes.
Yeah. And I think for the purposes of this program, when we say production, we're talking about cultivation, harvesting. Once we get out of the harvesting portion and kind of like, typical farm activities, wash pack, that's where we move into processing. So we're talking about on-farm processing out.
If equipment needs to be purchased prior to when the grant is awarded, can the equipment only grant be used to pay off a loan that went directly towards purchasing the equipment?
No, the grant has to be within the project period for the grant. If it were an infrastructure-based grant and you had some costs that happened before the project period, it was like phase one that you had cost incurred, that could be used as match. But for the infrastructure only, it has to be the purchase of equipment within the project period.
Mobile commissary kitchens are pre-built if you don't own the land, for example. That may be something that we need to bring back to USDA because I'm not 100% sure on that, so I don't want to steer you wrong.
I'll make a note.
Will there be oversight to ensure that producers are truly purchasing local food? How do we know for sure that producers are going to do this? So there will be project oversight throughout the grant period. To what extent, we are unsure as of right now. I think you could definitely expect that someone from DEM, the RFSI team, will come out and do a site inspection. And as we are going through reporting, you'll be asked to report on the products that you're purchasing. Not in great detail, but we would want to make sure that we know for this exact reason, make sure that the product is local.
Yeah, and we would probably be asking what producers you're procuring your, produce from. I think we would be asking questions to make sure that the produce that you're getting is from local farms. And then also maybe following up with those farms to make sure that they're actually getting it. So there'll be some oversight to make sure that that is what's happening, because that's the goal. Each state has an RFSI program. And so each state is going to be able to fund their own producers in this way. So we want to make sure that our funding is going towards Rhode Island and regional farms.
Can a food label maker apply to this grant? Band sealers, weigh and fill machines, bottling equipment, is that eligible?
I think yes, because labeling is considered middle supply chain as long as the inputs are local. And I think USDA is settling for about 51% of inputs being local and supporting specialty crops in that way. So yes, with a little asterisk of a caveat that it still needs to support local producers.
Can you apply as more than one county?
Jack, it might be helpful to show the resiliency.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull that up.
While you're pulling it up, I'll answer Pat's question. We grow vegetables on farm and raise animals. The value-added products we make have both in them, would be eligible. That's tricky. USDA has stated that anything purchased for the grant has to be used for the grant purposes until the life of the grant is over. So you'd have to show how, let's say it was a 50-50 split, 50% of the products that go into it were vegetables and 50% were animal-based. And so you could probably apply 50% of that, not the 100%. That makes sense. Feel free to unmute if that's like easier to ask the question. So Jack is pulling up the resiliency, the distress indicator. So you'll be able to add in the application. It just has one right now, but you can add different counties within Rhode Island, and they only want it on the county level, I believe, for Rhode Island. So it should be pretty straightforward. Most folks serve more than one county, so I think that should be fine.
Do we have any more questions? So this is that DCI interactive map. So what you'll do is put in the state, you can put in the zip code to limit the factor. Say you are in 02905, it'll have a distress score of 82.6. So you would input that into your application template. The other thing that we wanted to show you is that small business standards tool. Essentially what you need is your 6-digit NAICS number or code. And you'll put that in here, and it'll let you know if you qualify as a small business association. Business. Want to give the opportunity for more questions, but we also know that your time is precious, and I am sure a lot of you the wheels are turning in your brain. As you are thinking of more questions that you may have for us, please send them our way. We are happy to answer over email, jump on a call with you, whatever works for you. I think I saw another one come in.
I just saw one too. I'm just trying to find it.
Can a local farm apply for construction of a new expanded retail farm stand? Yes, I believe so. I would say if you are if there's an activity that meets that middle of the supply chain qualification, construction is allowed of a new facility and of modernizing facilities. So if your farm stand is packing and distributing, then I would say yes. But if you are just building out like a retail storefront, I would say no.
I think so. I think if we go back to the application, there's like activities that are allowable. So if the construction of a retail space fit those activities, then yes. Yeah. So aggregation is something, and so is distribution, but yeah. What is included in middle supply chain? I believe we have a definition.
We do.
Things processing and distribution is considered middle supply chain. USDA has defined it. So we'll just pull that up.
So what is the definition of middle of the supply chain? So it's those middle stages: processing, aggregation, and distribution. And I believe they go a little bit further. This is the FAQ document that USDA has released. So let's see.
So as Jack's looking through it, I think in a retail farm stand example, aggregation wouldn't be your own product. It would be like, let's say I'm purchasing produce from multiple farms, aggregating it there and selling it, then I would consider that mid supply chain.
We will send a copy of the slide deck and hyperlinks to all of the attendees after the recording. So I'm trying to find the specific activities.
Sure. I'll respond to Nathan's question. Yes, he will. Jack just said he will send it, and the application will go live on November 1st. However, as we mentioned, the templates that are going to be the bulk of the application are already available through the DEM website. And so if you are able to, if you're interested and want to start your application, that would be a good place to start in completing and working through those documents, because the other part of it is just going to be simple and basic applicant information. The application is going to be through the State of Rhode Island Grants Management System, eCivis. So some folks may be familiar with that process. If you've applied for any state grants in the last year or so, all state entities are moving to its online grants management platform.
So these are some examples that USDA is giving regarding the infrastructure.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Zoom in, is that what you mentioned?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, of course. How's that?
There you go.
So it's the aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, or distribution of the targeted agricultural products. So it's expanding processing capacities, adding product types, increased production volume, supporting new wholesale retail product lines, modernizing equipment, purchasing and installation of specialized equipment, modernizing manufacturing, tracking, storage, information technology systems, enhancing worker safety through new technologies or investment in equipment or facility improvements, construction of a new facility, increasing packaging and labeling capacities, increase storage space, including cold storage, develop, customize, or install climate smart equipment, modernize the equipment to ensure food safety, and then training on that equipment. So some of what that might look like is hiring personnel to assist with the project implementation of the activities, purchasing special purchase equipment, analyzing potential facility upgrades, planning for hazard analysis control points, upgrades to your facilities. So that might be on-farm post-harvest processing, preservation, storage, cold storage, post-harvest cleaning and grading, aggregator warehouse and storage, including cooperatives, purchasing of freezer equipment, cold storage again, processing, canning, preserving, pasteurization, preparation, packaging, drying, hulling, shelling, and milling, cooking, baking, juicing, distilling, fermenting.
So there are a lot of things that this can cover. And I think what folks will have to look at is if you have a project of, building out an existing structure and it's a shared use space. So maybe some of these activities are going to happen and some are going to be either unallowable due to the type of commodity, or it's more basic farming practices. For example, cold storage may be allowable, but just kind of storing your produce would not be. Then you have to think about, this could cover a portion of it and the other part could be matched, or maybe not match. The other part can be supplementing the program, depending. Guess we could just wait a minute or two to see if any more questions come in. If folks could want to unmute themselves or raise their hands, the option to do so, and then we can wrap it up, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. We hope this was informative. And as we get more information from USDA regarding the application, the process, we'll be letting you know. And a perfect place to stay updated is to keep looking at our DEM RFSI website page, which looks like this. It has that FAQ, both of the templates, and then some specific information.
Not seeing any questions in the chat or hands raised, so I think we're good to end the webinar. Look forward to seeing applications in the future.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.